Welcome back to the Winner's Circle, everybody. I am here today with Becca from SugarCRM, SugarAI. They are the latest winner in the SAMI Awards, and you guessed it, for helping us organize and find all our data inside of that sales and prospecting and marketing engine that they have built for us. Becca, welcome to the show and congratulations on the award.
Hi, Russ. So great to be here. Thank you so much for having me. It's really an honor.
Now, I have been following you guys for years. I was telling you earlier, I think I implemented Sugar. It's got to be 20 years ago now. And, at a pretty large company because it was so flexible, easy to do. We could do it on a dime. We didn't need a budget. We just did it. We actually bought a server. It was kind of a way for us to get into a CRM. Sugar has changed a lot, but you have this rich history. Tell us a little bit about Sugar if anybody doesn't know them. Give us that little elevator pitch.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I mean, sugar does have a really interesting history, and one that spans many decades. And I think when I look at the company and the journey they've been on, it really also speaks or parallels to the different chapters of the CRM story. And we're really redefining CRM for the AI era. And I think that's a really big milestone. So for decades, these CRM systems, they focused on collecting customer data, giving sellers more information to sift through. And we believe the future isn't just about more data for data's sake, it's about better decisions. And so our offering combines CRM, ERP data, and AI to really connect to the customer that matters most to our customers, and helps with revenue signals and taking the information for sales teams to know really what to do next, take that next step. So it's a really exciting time. Our precision selling story is one we're really proud of and happy to be here today to talk.
Well, it's this is one where actually things should get better. I think it's the promise of advertising too, right? It's that contextual data coming in, buying signals to where we're not going to get annoyed by the ads that we see all the time. They're going to know we bought a product, and that's been that promise for so long. Sugar's been in the business for, over 20 years. Now you guys are moving into this AI world where that intent kind of can almost be inferred. It can be
Mhm.
learned. That you have this great artificial intelligence to help you with this. What's the moment when you realize that kind of Sugar CRM banner had to be kind of rebranded as AI?
Yeah, I think you really, really spoke to it. The former generation of CRM that many companies are still living in was one of a suite of products that really required the user to stitch together the insight. It promised a lot of access to data, but really didn't do anything to do the analysis work or even the next action work. And that's when we realized that the promise of CRM really was failing to deliver to the customers. And where the market went was no longer aligned to this historical thought of CRM, really causing the shift in our product strategy to leverage AI. And I think the difference that we saw was, again, it wasn't AI just to say AI. It was AI to make sure, especially for the sales user of our product, that they were just given, what is my next action? Go do, versus having to do analysis and looking through reports and dashboards to figure it out themselves. And so we realized the needs of the user were no longer aligned to the old promise of CRM, and that really shifted our evolution.
Yeah, and it's funny because we've seen this massive evolution in the product, right? And in all CRMs, really, of kind of this Salesforce or Sugar CRM like interface
Mhm.
that you expect somebody to be behind their desk for managing a queue, and that's just not the reality of most sales situations, and most CRM situations. You're almost rarely behind your desk. There's definitely desk people there making calls and it's really interesting how it's evolved into mobile with COVID and everything else. That whole transition has been really interesting. You came from Highland, a company with its own kind of legacy in enterprise content management. What did that experience teach you about kind of taking that mature product, forward without alienating all the existing customers?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think at any time of a product evolution, it's something you have to be really cognizant of because every customer is on their own journey and their infrastructure and tech is at their own level of maturity as well. And to me, I think it's about meeting people ultimately where they are, but making sure you're connecting the value of what's coming next and then really being there to help support that journey, right? That's ultimately what we care about, to make sure that we have that customer first. perspective. And so I think that's the lesson learned, is understanding where people are, having that vision for where they need to be, and then helping them along that journey to get there. That's really where I see the most success in this type of evolution.
So you mentioned it before, this kind of precision selling. It's different than, what we were doing before, which was kind of very transactional process based selling. You would almost you would load in the process into your CRM and say, what's next after each step.
Yeah.
How do you explain this precision selling to somebody who's used to that kind of step based, logging calls and updating deal stages kind of CRM?
Yeah. So I really, to me, I think it's a trend that is really driven by the need of the user. And I think for a long time, we looked at the needs of the buyer. But if you look at the buyer of a CRM system, often maybe a revenue operations leader, a sales leader, they have different needs than the actual user of the software. And I think for a long period of time in CRM buying, everything kind of got mashed up together. And so what I see is really a shift from a data problem to a decision problem. And that decision problem is really rooted in the user of the software. Now, how that ladders back up to the buyer is really connected to like the increase in productivity for the organization, right? By having your salespeople focus on what that next decision is instead of really what the data is behind it. And so I think the really the crux of that situation is that CRM promised for many, many years, decades, this 360-degree view of the customer that many people were really excited about. And the reality is today, companies have more information than they ever did. The sellers, they don't want more dashboards, like I said earlier. What they really want is clarity. And so the scarcest resource in every revenue organization isn't data, it's mind share and attention. And so that's what I really think is the shift. And so when we talk about precision selling, to me, CRM is evolving from this system of record, which is what you describe with very linear, this, that, do this, then, to a system of intelligence. And then ultimately becoming a system of precision that's informing everyone on what the next best action is.
Why do you think most CRM vendors have struggled to kind of move beyond that dashboard and reporting? Even with all the AI hype in the category, it seems like we're still, more than half of the solutions out there are dashboard driven.
Yeah, I think for a lot of organizations, AI is being viewed as personal or individual productivity. It's layering AI on and then saying to the user, it should help you. You should use it in this way. And I think that they haven't really taken in mind the real world application. In many ways, old school workflow was the modernization of paper based process at a very kind of rudimentary level. And I think the enterprise use of AI, when it's grounded in the needs of the user, becomes the modernization of that workflow that you mentioned earlier. That's where I don't think a lot of companies have really thought that through. It's an engagement layer of an agent. It's kind of a build it yourself model, and it's still not connected to the needs of the actual user and what can drive the best outcome for them.
Yeah, when you see this go wrong, and I imagine you see it go wrong inside of every customer
Hmm.
visit, right?
Yeah.
Or every future customer visit, I should say.
Yeah.
When you see it go wrong, who's usually feels that most pain? Is it managers or admins, or is it the users?
I think probably the most pain is often at the user level, but it might not be the pain that's heard the most. I think the pain that's heard the most is going to surface a leadership level up or two who's really looking at what is going on within our business. Why am I seeing churn? Why am I seeing issue with customer retention? Why am I seeing issue with inventory levels? That's who is probably going to first wave the flag of pain. But as they get into it, they realize there was some quiet pain being suffered across the users of the software for a long time. And I think the language is different, and that's why the dots don't always connect. And so it's the user experience. It's what you mentioned earlier. I, as a salesperson, I'm not just sitting in front of my machine all day. I'm on the road. I'm in front of customers. I might be at different, job sites, et cetera. And so I don't have that ability to just sit in front of a computer. But the way that then translates back to the business, I think, is almost like a lagging indicator when it shows up in a revenue miss or churn on an account that surprises everybody. And it's a result of that overall experience.
Yeah. Yeah, I've been through a lot of these transitions before, like you're talking about, where you kind of come out of the out of the dark and into the light. And it's kind of, it does boil up problems in the business. It does, because you really do get, or at least this was, back when we didn't have AI and these things, you really had to go through the process and get everybody aligned. And that was a lot of the issue, was you just didn't have alignment within the sales organization, what the process was. And so it was, a lot of the process was actually writing it down, not
Hmm.
actually implementing it. When you're working with these AI tools, how are you going through and validating that these approaches actually work and that they just don't sound good?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, and it really does come down to a command or understanding of the business still. You still need to have an inherent understanding of how your business operates, which there's different levels of maturity of what that looks like across customers. But then making sure that that's informing kind of the outcomes, right? That's to me is the biggest thing with the insights is that next action. And it's saying based on these triggers, this is what is from my business. And so I do still think there is this business layer that has to be understood inherently to help make sure you're getting the best outcomes possible. But what I also think from a lesson learned standpoint is that the growth for a lot of organizations isn't hiding in new data, it's hiding in the business signals that they already have but aren't connected. And so that's another piece of it too, is really looking at the technology landscape proper and thinking about all of the systems where data is residing. And for our solution, we sit on a lot of data for our customers. And so there is a lot of inherent that they're almost sitting on, like a gold mine, so to speak, that allows them to really tap into that with this AI capability.
Yeah, it's amazing how people don't see that,
Uh-huh.
because in a lot of businesses there are so many data pools that almost go untapped.
Hmm.
And it's things like, in telecom, we knew that if you were calling in to ask about when your contract expired, you were looking to move, right?
Yeah.
So you would flag the sales team to make some follow-up calls and put the customer on, a white glove treatment. And so there was flags like that all in your business that are happening every day inside customer service organizations, techs, whatever, and all of these signals, and then your customers' own signals of usage of your product or whatever, that I just don't, I think a lot of times missed. Have
Hmm.
you found any kind of results that surprised your customers? Once you'd kind of turn these spigots on, do you have any kind of named accounts that you are kind of proud of?
Yeah, I mean, we've had some really good customer stories that really speak a lot to what you're speaking to, Russ. And what I love about those stories is that it's they all start with the business problem or the business challenge and not the metrics. And so it's not starting with the data, it's really starting with the crux of this problem, maybe that they were trying to solve, to your example, or a pattern that they had been observing throughout their business. And so what we find in working with our customers is that the customer is able to shift a lot of their time to more value added activities, right, that better serve the business. And what's interesting is then there's this really incremental compounding result where we're seeing outcomes that are like double digit growth, double digit reduction in time, increase in customer retention with not easy by any means, but one could argue kind of more and like modifications and tweaks than big overhauls like you would have seen 8 to 10 years ago, right? In an enterprise SaaS environment. And so that is something that I think is a really proud point for us and really pride for our customers ultimately is when they're unlocking their own business growth, or really significant productivity improvements that they just didn't have before by unlocking the insights that they need for their teams.
Yeah, and tools like Sugar and with the addition of AI, I think I've got a blog somewhere coming out on this. Um, it's really the retooling of every business in the world again, right?
Mhm.
We kind of did this with what we called the digital transformation, which was
Yeah.
literally the worst branding ever, because it sounded like, I don't know, it sounded like your grandmother or grandfather came up with it, first of all, because nobody wanted to be in a digital
No.
transformation. Um, and it was this transition to kind of to the internet and online, right, where everything went online
Mhm.
or connected, I guess. And we're through that. This is something different.
Mhm.
This is now, we kind of adapted our businesses for online, and some businesses are obviously all online, but it was more of an adaptation. This is, you can get rid of you know, you get rid of all sorts of stuff in your business. You can retool your entire infrastructure if you have the right partners, the right thinking, the right tools to do so. And it seems like with you guys connecting ERP and the AI into existing CRM, it kind of ties it all together. Was that a real design decision when you kind of started to think about that?
It absolutely was, and I think, something we talked about a little bit earlier, but this notion of the core system stack of a customer and, working with customers, customers will answer that question differently if you speak to them about what do they view as their core system stack. But for us, we know that especially in the space in which we play, that ERP data is a really critical repository of data that ultimately feeds really important insights to salespeople. Salespeople don't live in ERP though. And so that became a very just natural connection that we've had with ERP for a very long time. But the story, when it's applied with AI, is exponentially more powerful for a customer. And I think for a long time, we were expected as users of software to really work for the data. We had to put the work in to get the value out of the data, the time and the effort. And now it's the data is really doing the work for the user and delivering the value. And so I think that value equation is shifting, right? Like, how much effort do I have to put in for how much value I'm getting out? I think the AI unlock with the integration of CRM and ERP data is that the data is working for me now. And I don't have to work for the data. I don't have to have an analyst to build a report to tell me what I need to do. And then I'm waiting for that decision. It's just happening real time. And really making sure it's more of an empowerment philosophy, I would say, is a real shift in that story as well.
Well, and I like how you guys have framed this because the dashboards and reports are gone. That dreaded task list of what am I doing today is gone. You've kind of boiled up this next best actions. Walk us through kind of just, verbally, kind of what the difference is there. And then walk us through what it means kind of in a rep's day-to-day workflow. How does it change their work?
Yeah, I think from a more of a macro user perspective, the old experience, as many of us have experienced with CRM platforms, is logging in and self-navigating. Like who did I talk to last week? What account do I need to follow up on? And it's a lot of search-based navigation to what you are assuming is your next. Maybe it's your written to-do list, maybe you drive out of your calendar. Either way, it's very user specific and independent based on really working patterns and behaviors. It's never been rooted in what are the most important things I need to do today, right? That's never really been that experience within the CRM. Now, as a salesperson, what this means for our customers is when their sales reps are logging into the system, the AI capabilities are doing that work for them. And so they're saying, hey, based on what you have scheduled on your calendar, hey, based on these insights about this account, hey, based on this to do, whatever that may be, these are the top things you need to be focusing your time and attention on. And here's everything you need to know to get yourself ready for that customer meeting or for your next call. It's doing the legwork and serving it up in a way that's very consumable and easy to action. And I think that's the key part of our story that is really different and we continue to really emphasize is it is action oriented for the user to say this is the next best action and here's why and this is what you need to know. And it becomes again more about empowerment for that user and they don't have to go back and do all the legwork to make sure and validate was that the right thing? How do I know? It's really done for them.
Walk us through some of the customizations that you can do in the AI, kind of more not at an account level like a CRM account, but at the customer level, I guess, at your customer level. What sort of tweaking can they do to that AI to kind of make it more about their business?
Yeah, it's really rooted in that smart methodology to understand the customer. And so as we think about the breadth of our customers, there's a lot of different applications based on their business. When I look at some of the recent wins from our customer, an interesting piece is that even though some of our customers can be in entirely different industries, they're solving the same problem. And so I would say that the flexibility it gives is to make sure we're meeting the needs of our customers based on their business. But I would also say that I think a nice aha moment maybe is that old technology and workflow approach was very linear and assumptive that everything was different. And what we're finding is the AI technology is delivering this pattern recognition that is suggesting we're solving the same problems. Maybe the vernacular is different, maybe the way they speak about it is different, and that customization is certainly capable of doing that, but the problems are the same. And so we're finding a lot of innovation connection, I guess, in that way, realizing that the problems remain the same, and it's really about how does the solution meet the needs of the customers.
Yeah. One thing that's interesting now is we're coming into this agentic world. You've given this great platform, and it kind of seems like it's on the verge of being agentic slash that kind of chat know it all.
Mhm.
Um, Walk us through kind of the agentic plans. I think I remember reading something the other day that most sales forces have gone and started using AI. The vast, vast, vast majority, and I think that's true with almost every department in the company now. Um, but they have not adapted kind of this agentic AI that replaces kind of the manual workflow steps. This is definitely the year of kind of this agentic AI kickoff. How are you guys kind of enabling agents inside of the platform?
Yeah, it's so I think there's two pieces of something that you just asked that I want to call out. I think for a lot of organizations, what we find is when they put AI into their business, regardless of what that looks like, it's really more of a ask me anything search bar, glorified kind of concept, right? The prompting and the thought behind it isn't reflective of intentional business transformation. It's really more, again, like personal productivity. So when you think about like the agentic AI use case, I think for me, it's that the technology should absorb complexity so that people can focus on the relationships they have with their customers ultimately and really have more creativity in their judgment to solve problems for their customers. And so that I think is a lot of the evolution that we're going to see is that it's not just like what's on my to-do list for today. That's not the goal of what we're solving, right? We want the agentic use case to your question to be saying, based on the fact that you're logged in as Becca and I know what your role is, and I'm looking at all of this data, this is what you need to know, Becca, which could be different than the recommendation for Russ. And so really that is more of the evolution. And I think for businesses, especially what I'm hearing a lot of is its decision velocity. So it's not only next best action, but the agentic evolution is really around the velocity of those decisions. How quickly are the organizations can really recognize the change needed and understand what matters to act confidently. So it's really about that velocity loop, I think, for organizations.
Yeah, the velocity is definitely changing, especially B2B. It seems to be moving, even faster than ever. The consumer always seems to lag a little bit. B2B always seems to be ahead for some reason.
Yeah.
In a lot of those areas, I guess there's more money at stake. How has the B2B landscape changed? We all saw it change a lot, right? When we made that shift from our digital transformation, our online world, right? We were now walking into car dealers knowing how much they paid for the car. Right? How is that changing your role and your job and your sellers?
Yeah, I think it is the modernization of general buying behavior. When you talk about digital transformation, the other trending topic at that time that was really popular was the B2C influence and B2B buying, right? So, as a marketer specifically, it was a lot around how do I meet a B2C expectation in a B2B environment. Now it's almost more of like a B2U. It's like a business to user concept because all of us show up as user centric thinkers to the point of just the proliferation of tools, how much we can do on our own now. And so I think the persona and the role in business in general is kind of an interesting split. We would usually say, well, there's IT folks and there's line of business folks, and then there's executives, and you kind of put different users into these different macro buckets. And now I think what we're seeing is everybody's showing up to some degree of fluency in the conversation and also comfort or confident in the situation with this AI usage. And so it makes that experience of meeting the needs of the customer different. I don't know that I would say it's harder. I just think it's a different way to look at the engagement with the organization, really to make sure that there is an expectation that they have that can be met across the organization. Because again, everyone's showing up a little bit different than they used to.
Yeah, and you're if you're with the CFO, that's where the kind of rubber meets the road. You guys are trying to go for that kind of revenue intelligence ROI. You're trying to convince everybody, hey, with our system, you're going to, be better. What does that ROI conversation actually look like with a skeptical CFO these days?
Yeah, a lot of CFOs, I think that role is also changing. A lot of CIOs or VPs of IT, whatever the title may be, are now reporting in to CFOs. And so I think that CFO role is changing where there's not only the ROI justification or question that you have, but it's also tech stack investment. So we're getting a lot of CFOs that also want to understand the cost of the technical infrastructure their organization is running. And they're asking those questions around, can AI help with, costs and expense, right? A different way to look at tech investments. So I think that that's another example of how the roles are changing within the B2B landscape. And we have to make sure that we're really painting this bigger picture of what this looks like, because everybody is starting to think through, what does the next 3 to 5 years look like in terms of what does my tech stack look like, and what is core and what is not, and where do you fit? So it is definitely a different conversation.
Yeah. How long does it take usually to see kind of measurable impact after you guys go live in a customer?
I think it depends on the problem that they were trying to originally solve, which probably sounds somewhat obvious, but I do think that context matters, because there's these incremental progress points within customers where they're seeing tangible, valuable impact relatively quickly post deployment. There's a quick turn on being able to see that user experience improving and how their sellers are actually engaging with the software to get to that next action. That is a very tangible felt improvement, maybe slightly more qualitative than quantitative. I think the quantitative outcomes still don't take that long, as they're starting to see these insights and actions informing less churn disruption or earlier renewals with customers, possibly contract extensions, better inventory management indicators, right? Because we rely on that ERP data for a lot of the insights, but we can also help back if we understand customer interest and sentiment on certain products, what those inventory levels can be. So there is this nice bi-directional, I think, on the quantitative side that does take a little bit longer. Again, it depends on the customer themselves, but I think the qualitative impacts can be felt much sooner, just because the overall experience improves so much.
Yeah, and I don't know what you guys find, but in my experience, when we brought in new CRMs, there was usually other change going on inside of the organization, whether it be product, people, or something else,
Hmm.
or culture. There's acquisitions always brought new CRMs, and so I imagine you come into a lot of change in these types of situations, whether it's a new leader or a new system, replacing an old system. There's a lot of change in there.
There really is, and I think because, in my mind, CRM is reflective of a core type of technology for an organization. There is usually some sort of compelling event, to your point, and I do think that there is often a question around, is the level of investment I'm making commensurate with the value I'm getting? That's something that a lot of organizations are asking themselves as they're looking to increase license costs and maybe unclear value they're getting from their current vendor, yet the price is going up. That's often a time where people are reaching out and saying, now's the right time to look at something different. I want to see that value return equation I talked about earlier being higher, in terms of what I'm paying and putting in to get out. So we have a lot of customers coming with us that are just saying, prices are increasing. We're not exactly sure why. The value may not be there, whatever that story may be. But I do think the other piece of it is around, where does AI fit into the business proper? And so I think that that's fostering these innovative discussions across the business where people's aperture is just expanding to say, what does this look like more? So it's not really digital transformation as it was, but it is the modern take on, where are we going and what tools and technology do we need to best set us up for success as a business. That's another big change factor where we engage with a lot of customers.
Yeah. Well, it's such an interesting space that, this whole market is transitioning. It's going through such an amazing time right now. I imagine the DevOps team at Sugar is just like loving life now with AI tools. It's like engineers are loving it because it's like the backlog becomes a no log.
Yeah.
It's such an awesome time to be in that role too. I think of all of the roles it's really hit the most. It seems, at least in my world, marketing in general has been hit positively by AI, and I would say engineering, software engineering, obviously,
Yeah, I mean,
also a
in
big.
one of the soft impacts that I just love seeing is I think in previous worlds, and times, like, technology really sat with technologists.
Yeah,
And as somebody outside that remit, if you weren't taught to program, you couldn't really contribute much, right? So it felt like 2 different worlds. I think AI is doing 2 really interesting things for, I think, just employees and people in general, is that everyone is evolving to think more like a technologist, in just a different way. Again, that we're showing up and asking the questions like, could it do this for me? Could I use it for that? What would this look like? And then the interesting, I think, push then is having that interlock with the technologist where you start to better understand requirements, and what really goes into it, right? So I think it makes us smarter, really. Like I look at it as a smarter marketer because I have these really great conversations with our leaders where I can say like, this is where I think it fit and this is how I think it would work. And then it's just really, really roll up your sleeves and talk about it where you also like inherently identify process improvements. Like, why did we do that? I don't know. Why would I repeat that with AI? Right? Let's just like not do that anymore. So it's really, I think, lets everybody lean in a bit more into that technology world that again, years ago, if you didn't learn to program, you really couldn't participate.
yeah, and I think marketers were some on the forefront of that because we seem to get a lot of those tools the first with CRMs and email marketing platforms and everything else. We kind of dragged IT into that SaaS world with
Yes.
with with, with help from Sugar. So thank
Yeah.
you.
Yeah.
Well, Becca, thank you so much for joining us, and congratulations on this award, the best named award in the business, the CRMEs. Winning the top 10 sales CRM there. Congratulations on all the success. We're going to keep an eye on you guys going forward. It's really interesting to see how you guys are.
Thank you so much. It's been great being here today. I love the conversation and we're really excited about where we're headed.
Thanks again.
Thank you.